very often the words of these songs are saying in multiple ways, you can live as you want. You can love as you want. You can be happy when you do what makes you feel good. The music goes with the words.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a reason that you don't put those words to Bach. You don't put those words, for goodness sake, to Gregorian chant. You put those words to a very specific kind of music, which fits with the music and is saying the same thing. And words have power, music has power, and it's speaking bad dispositions into us. Hi, I'm John Cutterback.
And I'm Sofia Cutterback.
If you're wondering whether you can really be friends with your spouse
and raise children into responsible adults with whom you have a relationship
and do what it takes to make a homestead, reconnecting with your body and the land wherever you live.
If you just want to think more about how to make a truly happy home in our trying times,
then The Intentional Household, a LifeCraft podcast, is for you. Join us. Welcome, everybody. Great to be together. I'm always happy to be with my wife, Sofia. And today's episode is 5 ways to bring the power of great music to your home. Now, we have already done an episode on music, and that one was called The Hidden Power of Music in the Home, Trojan Horse or Genuine Gift.
And that one really has principles of how to assess the power of music, what kind of power it has to move us and to form and shape us, underscoring why then it's important to have music in the home.
Exactly. And we use some great philosophers. We use Plato and Aristotle. So really it was a discussion in principle. And we hope that that is very helpful. We really recommend that you look at that first, listen to that first, because that would be giving kind of the reason for the kind of radical approach and suggestions that very concretely we're going to make here. So the idea here is here are kind of 5 ways, 5 steps for someone who is convinced, music it's a gift. But it's a gift that, as the greatest gifts, it brings a great challenge with it. It's like God gave us human freedom. This is central to the gift of what it is to be human. But in giving that gift, it brought with it a danger of misuse. Something very much analogous here. Music is a divine gift, as even the pagan philosophers held, that is to help us in that glorious and difficult work, but that central work in human life of forming persons, forming the young, but not just forming the young, because life is always about forming, trying to grow more into the people that we're called to be. And so that's a whole life project, but there's a number of tools, sometimes surprising ones, in that project. And music is often the sleeper. It's the one that the Greeks saw very clearly is so central. But I think by and large, we have made the mistake, and many had made it then too, they pointed that out, of treating it not as the very serious thing that it is, but more of just, oh, well, whatever, that's just a matter of what you happen.
So in this podcast, we're going to get super practical, because I think it's so funny. Music is so ubiquitously available to us on the one hand, but on the other hand, it seems like it makes our selection very narrow at the same time. And so if you want to make a change in the music that you listen to in your home, sometimes it's hard to know where to start. So we're hoping to talk about 5 practical ways that you can really begin to make that change in your home, and offer some very practical suggestions about where you can start.
Great. What do you mean, by the way, that it makes it narrow? I'm not sure what you meant by that.
Well, it's funny. It's a little bit like food and fashion. On the one hand, it's all very, very available, but as regards fashion, if you're going out to buy new clothes, your options, well, there's a lot of clothes out there, but your options are few, right? So it's whatever the industry has decided is the color for the season, or the shape for the season, or the size. And if your shape and size is different from what is kind of considered standard, you have a lot of trouble finding clothes. And so in the same way, I just feel like the ubiquitous availability of music actually sometimes makes it so it's harder to find different kind of music from what is standardly accepted or being peddled, so to speak. Now, that's not to say that it's not available. We are fortunate. There are many different ways to then access the music once we know what we're looking for. So we just want to give some practical suggestions about what things to look for.
So it might not be that is ubiquitously available, might not itself be the problem. It sounds like you're referring to a problem. I think is a great one to start with. The musical variety of what people listen to, I think, is actually much less than we think,
Right.
because we listen to what's served up to us by and large. And if you turn on the radio in the car, I know that's not so much the way people consume music anymore, and maybe now with these different platforms, that there is more diversity. There probably is.
But you have to know what you're looking for.
But you'd have to know what you're looking for. And by and large, we tend to, well, kind of just like when you go into the store, we tend to, buy what's on sale right there before us. And that country music, for instance, is so ubiquitous, is surely partially a function of this is just what everyone is introduced to and they hear, and
It's what's being played.
they develop a taste for it. And so they reach for it.
Yeah.
So it actually, though we certainly have the technological means to go for more offbeat things, that doesn't mean that people are doing it. And which raises again this whole further question, particularly if the better music often requires acquiring a taste for it, kind of being trained to be able to appreciate it. And just like by that analogy to food, that, that we tend to just kind of go for that immediately sweet and satisfying. Of course, who's not going to, want to eat chips? But you have to develop, your taste for better things. Well, in music, where's that better taste going to come from? That goes to where I think we're going to have some things that will be very helpful.
Well, it's typical us that we're already digressing at the very beginning, but I am just going to take 1 second more further digression, because I think the kind of music that is the most threatened by this way of listening to music that we have is actually folk music that's made in person, impromptu, in the home or in communities, which I particularly love that kind of music because it's the kind that we can easily reproduce ourselves. We don't have to be professionals. We don't have to have a long history of study. And I think that's the kind of music that happened a lot in previous generations that we don't do as much anymore. And so anyway, I just throw that out there because I am going to make a plug about learning folk music and frankly, providing some tracks of music for you all to start learning some of these folk songs on your own at home.
Which is not what this is going to be about, right?
No, because we are going to be talking about,
that's great.
Yeah, we are going to be talking about ways of finding canned music that is nevertheless better than what's being served up generally.
And I think we should say, we were just reading an essay by a gentleman that was pointing out the problem of it being so easily available and that taking away from kind of developing the art of making your own music. And and that we're not really going to address.
Yeah, that's a separate topic. Let's not digress too much.
We have to be where we are.
Yeah.
And it pretty much is a given at this point that people are going to be listening to music. Although really, maybe we should have had one of the ways here is be willing to have silence.
Yeah, that's true too.
I mean, we don't always have to be listening to something. So the importance of silence, and I love the point, good music fits with silence. It doesn't interrupt it in the same way, although it still is a kind of interruption. And, so we're not going to be wanting to just, even with great music, be listening to it all the time, pipe it in wherever you are, for goodness sake. No, that's not going to be on our list of suggestions, but we are going to be suggesting things that weren't going to be done 100 years ago, where it's just, well, while you're doing your homework, put on some Mozart, right? I know people couldn't do that before, but let's face it, we're not going to hear Mozart live, but we are hearing a lot of other stuff. So let's go ahead and take the opportunity to up the ante. All right, so we've made a list here. We've been thinking about this, and we're going to keep thinking about it as we share this list. Maybe we can change it as we're going. One, change what we listen to. First step, change what we listen to. All right. I mean, my thought here is this is especially geared towards parents, because I know a lot of parents, thank God, get in the mode of maybe reading some good Plato, Aristotle, hearing some of these principles, and they have a sense of, we need to do something different. We need to do something different for our children. We need to do something different in our home. Music is a kind of Trojan horse. It's speaking to our souls, all of us in our home, in ways that we don't want to be spoken to. So I think parents need to recognize this can demand something of us. Or if we're not talking about us vis-a-vis children, then we're up for all of us, wherever we are. The kind of first step is to be willing to gird ourselves up and say, we're probably, the vast majority of us are listening to music that would be better that we weren't listening to. And for various reasons and various degrees. But particularly looking at it from the parental perspective, it doesn't make sense to kind of say, all right, well, the kids, we're going to give them good music. Meanwhile, we're off just kind of doing our own thing, continuing on the things that we have come to know and love. And that's going to be hard. That's going to be hard. There are songs that I'm just share this right straight up. And then your experience, dear, is a bit different. But there's songs that very much speak to me of my childhood. And when they come on, if I'm even just sometimes walking through, a store and the oldies come on, and I just stop, and sometimes it almost moves me to tears, or I just want to, kind of start singing out loud with it. It reminds me of when I was a child. And, is this bad? Well, no, it's not bad. Do I think, though, it's unfortunate that I have these kind of warm memories connected with music that is the negative quality that music is? Yes, I think that's unfortunate. And I'm not going to hit myself with a sledgehammer over it, but I am going to recognize it's worth, this isn't denying who I am. It's just saying, I can do better. I want to be better. And I want to do something better for my children.
Yeah, well, I have to say that I think something important in that circumstance, because obviously we can't change our experience as children, is when we have that feeling, that warm feeling of nostalgia, that we recognize that it's nostalgia for our childhood, that it's not necessarily a warm feeling of affirmation of the goodness or rightness or appropriateness of the music, right? And so if we can separate those two things, then we don't have to throw away or close the door on our personal experience of nostalgia of our childhood. That's going to be part of our childhood. And we have that nostalgia, and it's okay for us to have that nostalgia about our childhood, as long as we don't confuse it with, oh, the music, therefore I have to hold on to.
Great point.
Right. So I have a comparable experience with dreadful 70s, 80s architecture. It's some of this awful architecture I just have such a warm feeling for, because it's that kind of house that I was raised in when I was quite young. So I just have to not confuse that with actually an appreciation for the art form.
And this is where, look, we're in the weeds now. We're getting very concrete. I talk about these things a lot with students, people, children, friends. Someone says, well, you're saying I should never listen just for kind of nostalgia's sake to the music I liked when I was young, or when we were first married, or whatever. Look, I'm not here to just be Mr. Hardliner and say, yes, you can never. It is better for you absolutely never to go back to that. You're feeling a deep need to reconnect with your childhood and listen to some of the music from your childhood. Well, then go ahead. I'm not going to stand over here and say, this is going to sink the ship. But at the same time, let's be adults and rational. If these principles apply about music, we have to be willing to ask some questions here, particularly along the lines of, have we become emotionally attached to things that, okay, granted now, we're not going to live in denial that we are attached to them, but it would be better for us not to be attached to them. I mean, look, we all know we can get attached to certain kind of food that's not good for us. It's not something to beat ourselves up over, but it's something to try to do something about, and to try to reattach ourselves to something better. And we're trying to move forward here. And we can also look at it from the perspective of wouldn't it be great if our child, when they hear, a great piece of Haydn one day, that's what reminds them of their childhood in this rich and beautiful way. That's more ideal. It is. I'm willing to say that. I'm willing to assert that in case for your consideration. So what do you think? So change what we listen to. That's just one of the things we'll talk about as we go on. Will help give a little sense of what that means. And of course, the other podcast that has already discussed some principles, I think, has pushed us already in that direction.
Yeah. So, and also by way of encouragement on that point, if there's music that you love because you have nostalgic connections to it, of course, if you're switching what you listen to, it's going to be hard to give that up initially. However, as you come to love the other more, it's less and less painful, right? Yep. So what we're talking about is a plan of forming our appetite to come to love what's new. And then once you start really loving this new way that you've chosen through exposure, familiarity, it becomes easier and easier. So anyway, coraggio and the initial steps of changing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a great analogy for obvious reasons to life itself. It's kind of conversion, changing of heart, turning our heart towards better things, training ourselves, being willing to say no. And this is always because of a better yes. The strength of our no comes from the strength of our yes. There's a great gift of music that is not instantiated in any and all music that happens to appeal to us. Because we have to remember that certain things appeal to us that shouldn't.
Right. Yeah.
Whether we want to do our best to change that a little bit. Our second suggestion is to make rules for music in the home.
Yeah. So if you're in a context where you still have young children in the home, teenagers, this would apply, of course.
In the most direct way. And we can just say now, if it's not, of course, it could also be for grandparents when our grandchildren come to visit us.
Sure.
What music they bring with them, what is going on in our home. And this could be a beautiful opportunity. And again, in a winning way. Hey, we have to always be doing this in a prudent, in a loving way, in a winning way in view of the good. What if you end up being those grandparents who's maybe they're the parents of your grandchildren, probably means your children, don't have the exact same view on this. Well, okay, you're not trying to subvert what they're doing, but it's well within your prerogative to have this sense of, in our home, this is what we do. And again, obviously you want to be try to be winning about it, but that can be a great opportunity to offer something. So again, age appropriate way, depending on where we are in our whole household. Maybe this is not so much if you're a household of one, or you're just empty nest. I'm not saying we have to make rules for ourselves, but let's make some resolutions.
Yeah.
Let's think about kind of general ways of, are we just going to say, as a rule, we don't do this, we do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess enunciate the principle to yourself, just like you would enunciate the principle to other members of your household. If you're part of a larger household, there's a way that you enunciate the principles to yourself and really see them and understand them. And then from those principles come certain resolutions of what we will listen to or what we will not listen to.
Right.
Right.
So let's give an example. And often these rules will start in kind of the negative. And again, the strength of the no comes from the strength of a yes. Mm-hmm. The reason that we're saying no is because that there's something better here. And that's going to need to be enunciated. But we're just share right now what we've done. And didn't always work perfectly, but we're just going to share that for the sake of discussion. In any case, we more or less said our home is going to be free from rock music, most things that we call popular music, and this tends to include most of what's called country music now. And I know that cut close to the bone, and this might be a painful topic, and we're not going to be able to sort that all out. I mean, there's certain country songs that I absolutely do enjoy. There's a bit of diversity within country, but a lot of country has kind of just become rock music with a twang.
Okay, so what's the principle of why you say no rock in your home? Let's go over. I know we did that in our previous podcast, but let's just do a quick one shot, because we're talking about explaining the principle in order to elucidate the rule.
Well, first of all, I'd go to the kind of the high level of music is imitating in a uniquely powerful, present way moral dispositions of the human person, and you could even say a kind of worldview. There's in varying ways, kind of a worldview packed into the music. And by and large, much of the music that we're saying here that we have decided, you and I decided in our home to say no to. Why are we saying no to it? Because, as we suggested again in our last discussion of this, that it's actually a kind of Trojan horse. It's a presentation, and actually often a very winning and attractive and hard to resist presentation of the worldview, of the principles, of the values of a very contrary culture.
Can you flesh that out? What are some of the worldviews or moral attitudes that are being conveyed through rock?
First of all, kind of keeping that general, I would say it very often conveys in some way, you can live as you want. You can love as you want. And here's the interesting thing. Very often, the words of these songs are saying in multiple ways, you can live as you want. You can love as you want. You can be happy. You will be as you want. You will be happy when you do what makes you feel good. This tends to be what the words are doing. Very often the words are a kind of encouraging a primacy of the passions. How do you feel? Just can't resist that. Just got to have this. Just have to do this. Now one would say, okay, well that's just the words. But again, as we discussed last time, the music goes with the words.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a reason that you don't put those words to Bach. You don't put those words, for goodness sake, to Gregorian chant. You put those words to a very specific kind of music, which fits with the music and is saying the same thing. And it's actually kind of sweetening the
reinforcing
words.
It. Sure.
Just the way St. Augustine says that it's so designed that, was St. Augustine, was a different father of the church that we quoted last time, that by a beautiful design, by God's design, the beautiful words of our prayers are made more accessible to us by the music that kind of helps us go into those words, helps us receive those words. There's that beautiful power. The flip side of that is that kind of the bad words are being honeyed And I mean, think about that just on a very practical level, how often young people, good young people I know, you'll just hear them together singing out loud, sometimes full throat, singing out loud words. It's like, did you hear the words that you just said?
And they
they're
don't
doing
even
it
hear
because
it.
it goes with this fun music.
Yeah.
And
extraordinary.
is this harmless? No, it's not harmless. Words have power. Music has power.
Right.
And it's speaking bad dispositions into us. I'll get more specific. Kind of disordered / sensuous love. I would say by and large, what we'll broadly call the rock beat. And again, we're not going to get, we talked about this somewhat before. I'm not going to get all into the specifics, but I think here, it tends to be sensuous. It tends to be appealing to our lower passions. That's part of the reason. It's like, oh, kind of want to makes you dance. I want to make you dance with your hips. Ooh, I want to kind of get out there. And as one doctor, and actually referring, who was an expert on music, just said, rock music makes you feel sexy. And I think this is a kind of obvious reality. Kind of makes you feel sexy. Doesn't make you feel dignified. Makes you feel sexy.
Now, I have to underline, you said it makes you feel sexy. You said that's kind of obvious. The funny thing is that it's obvious, but what's no longer obvious is feeling sexy is considered acceptable. And that's the value. Yep. That's part of the values that of a society that's not healthy. It's obvious that it makes you feel sexy, but it's not obvious why that's not appropriate.
Okay, I like that. Or even maybe sometimes it's more subtle. It's not obvious that it makes you feel sexy per se, but it is making you feel something that is akin to feeling sexy, but even people that are otherwise normally on their moral guard, they don't recognize that it actually would be fair to kind of call this sexy.
Right.
And it's more just, well, it makes me feel energized. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel relaxed.
Yeah.
And that kind of energized, good, relaxed is a very specific kind of more sensuous, energized, good, relaxed. Other things, some of the music is very angry. It's just kind of an unhinged, kind of head-banging anger. A lot of it is despairing, is kind of encouraging you to give up. I mean, all of these things are the culture that we're in is, I say, its main negative features are very powerfully captured in its music. It tends to be an angry culture. Tends to be a despairing culture. It tends to be an overly sensuous culture. All of those principles in varying ways are being presented through the music and inculcated, kind of spoken into us, spoken into our soul, spoken into our body. Does that mean that immediately we go out and do despairing, sensuous, and angry things? Not necessarily, but it is speaking those things to us.
Yeah, and certainly cumulative effect. I just want to go back to talking about rock music being fundamentally, or in any case, frequently very sensuous. This is not to say that sexual experience or experience of sexual desire is a bad thing per se in itself. The reason it's bad in the context of that kind of music is because it's the sexual experience or desire outside of its appropriate context. Amen. So again, right. I'm thinking especially if you're talking to a teenager who has already acquired some habits in this regard and you want to make a change, you could totally see a teenager or an adult even saying to you, well, what's wrong with the sexual desire? I mean, we're supposed to have that. It's part of what it means to be human. It's healthy. Yes, it is. But of its nature, the appropriate sexual desire is always in relation to another in a very specific context of mutual self-donation, where it's in an isolated manner, completely abstracted from a context. That's where it's not appropriate and actually deforming.
Well said. I'm going to go a step further, and we're going to want to discuss this more, but we're going to have to restrain ourselves. I've had this conversation in class. I think it's worth presenting. This is where someone can reasonably say, okay, well then for this music that you're calling sensuous, then is there not a place for it, say, perhaps in marriage? Very important question. And my answer to that is absolutely no, because the music is already treating sexuality as an object. And when students push me on this, I put it to you this way. I hope that you'll be in a situation one day where if you are called to be married and you've chosen to be married and you're in marriage, that you'll have a sense of, when it comes to important times with your spouse, that your approach is not going to be, well, this is where we put on the sensuous music. No, there's never a point for sensuous music, because the very word sensuous is already implying that it's kind of been objectivized and
self-oriented
and really good, well said. made an object, made something kind of to be sought for the pleasure, kind of my subjective experience here, which is never what marital intimacy is about. It's about being virtuous and restrained and self-giving. And by an amazing design of nature, it brings with it great sense pleasure, but sensuosity is always something different. So there's more to be said there. I don't think there is, if one anticipate a question, I don't think there's music that goes with marital intimacy. I just don't think there is. It's as it were, it's not something to be put to music. I don't want to wax unnecessarily poetic, but maybe in a sense, it is its own music. It's just not, we don't need sensuous music. In fact, it's not fitting. We can leave that at that. I think, and this is just a good moment we're going to move on number 3, but making these rules in an age-appropriate way. We need to speak about these things. We need to speak with our spouse about them. We need to speak with our friends about them. And then we need to convey our understanding with our children in an age-appropriate way, that there's an appropriate time to say, let's just say particularly that we've decided we're resolving to do this. We already have teenagers who have bad listening habits. That's going to be a challenge. But hey, it's certainly happened before, and this can be reckoned with. We're going to sit down and you're going to have to, there maybe, just making a cold turkey rule might not work, but I think it is worth looking at really challenging your children in a way that you think is appropriate to the situation to move away from where they are, but help them by helping them understand. Honor them by saying, look, maybe even something like this. I don't understand these things perfectly, but as your parent here, I'm here to share with you. I've, by the grace of God, I've seen some things here I think are really important and going to make a big difference in your life. And I'm going to share with you some things here. I've been studying, learning, reading Plato and Aristotle. Take these principles we've been talking about and digest them and pass them on, because these are understandable. You don't have to understand it perfectly to understand enough to see the importance of this and to try to pass that on to our children and our loved ones.
I think especially with teens, maybe it provides an appropriate moment in which to say, only you can choose to assent to this, but mommy and daddy have been given care over our household and the environment in our household. And through our discernment, we've decided that this is the kind of music that's healthy for our family and this kind is not. So as a household, we're not going to listen to that. And we ask you to abide by those rules. So at the same time, one, giving them freedom. Secondly, inviting them to understand a concept, but to not feel like you can't say, as parents in our household, we're not going to listen to this kind of music. Yeah, I just want to give also as a practical suggestion, just because I actually had this experience of one of the children talking to me about music and saying, oh, it's so hard because I like that kind of music. And it was a moment which I had an opportunity to say, mommy likes that kind of music too. But because I know it's not good for me, I choose to not listen to it. It's really okay to say to your children that for various reasons, I really like that song too.
Sure.
But I've decided to not listen to it because I realize it's not what's good for me.
Absolutely. We're in this together. As in so many other things, music is close to the fundamental aspects of life.
Yeah. And if it's going to be hard for your kids, it's comforting for them to know that you're in the hardship with them, that you know what that feels like. I would say another thing something actually that my sister shared with one of the children when they were younger, which I thought was so beautiful. And maybe it would be helpful in the context of talking about music, that there's this place inside of our heart, she explained, that is designed for beauty. And that when we put beauty in that place in our heart, it actually expands our heart to be able to appreciate beauty more. And that when we put ugly things in, it makes it so that it kind of hardens and makes that place smaller. So we can't understand beautiful things. So she was inviting the children to love beautiful things by saying, whenever you listen to beautiful music, that place in your heart actually expands and makes you even not just be able to appreciate that particular piece of music, but makes you more capable of appreciating different and greater beautiful things. And so it's just a beautiful way of inviting children into the project of let's see if we can bring in beautiful music to expand that place in our heart that makes us capable of seeing and understanding more beautiful things than we would otherwise.
Great principle. Great principle. Let's go to our third, which is choose great music that you assign to particular people in the home. if possible, starting as babies. I don't remember who suggested this to us. It was suggested to us right at the beginning. Was it your mother?
I don't remember.
But
Amazing.
we loved this. And so let's just say you're in a situation where you're blessed to have new children coming into the home. We're about to give you a list of pieces that we recommend that you could, just examples you could choose from. With our first child, we did Mozart's Clarinet Quintet. I think go deep, go beautiful, go profound here. There's certain pieces that really lend themselves to this. And you don't want to have really inaccessible pieces or one that could drive you crazy if you hear it often. But something like Mozart's Clarinet Quintet, we really did find, and I'm pretty sure your mother had recommended that.
Yes.
So for our first child, from when she was in the womb still, we played her this music, and we always had a sense of, so even when she is born into this world further, into being outside the womb, she's going to recognize this music, and she's going to take it with her, and it's going to be forming her soul in a beautiful way from the start. And this doesn't mean you listen to it 5 times a day. It could be once a day. It could be twice a day. It could be once every couple days. But there's something
you intentionally choose, right? So not just part of a general playlist, but something that you intentionally choose.
And there's something even kind of fun about with an infant or then a little child. Oh, and here's your piece.
Yeah, this is your special piece that mommy and daddy played this for you.
And of course, it's a great way for parents to come to appreciate. You choose a great one. It's a way that these great pieces, because any music, if you listen to it 15 times a day, is going to wear on you. It's not supposed to be that way. But this repetition is an important part of reasonable repetition, is an important part of coming to appreciate these more. And we love, and we just get to the point where it's like, here's this da, 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 this part again that you and here comes this. There's a really beautiful part upcoming. So we all get to know it together. So that, again, in a moment we'll give a list. But if we can start as babies, but hey, if we're at a different place in life, we could just assign one right now to a 13-year-old. Hey, we're gonna play this. We're gonna play this one for you.
Or this one makes me think of you. This is your special song. I am remembering now about the Clarinet Quintet. Part of the reason that my mother recommended that we listen to that one, and of course, it goes hand in hand with this notion of music imitates moral states. That it doesn't have to be a clarinet quintet, Mozart's Clarinet Quintet, but if you're choosing a piece for a young child, of course, it makes sense. What are the values we want to convey to the children? Confidence in the goodness of life, joy, movement between happiness and sadness, with happiness being the dominant, light. So there's
hope.
So there's a lot of beautiful music you can listen to, but some music is more fraught with the tensions, with the valley of tears, than the confidence in the goodness of life. And as Christians, that's very, very important for us to start inculcating in our children very early on, is God's providence is over us and it's good all the time. And therefore we have confidence and hope. So it's kind of by choosing a piece like Mozart's Clarinet Quintet, it's like providing the soundtrack to your child's life of dependence, confidence, comfort in the goodness of God's plan for us.
I love that. And this also points up that there's, I think, with a good piece like the Clarinet Quintet, there's a happiness to it, but it's not just kind of a giddy,
it's not a banal happiness
passing.
Yeah.
The way that popular music can genuinely fun, very appealing. It just kind of makes you feel like sunshine. How could this song be bad? It just makes us feel so light and sunny. Okay, well, again, maybe we're going to come and talk about folk music, and there might be a place for that more banal, light and sunny song. But something like Mozart's Clarinet Quintet is capturing and conveying an important truth about human life. I like how I said it's kind of going big in showing there's real depth and richness and a joy in that depth and richness. And who's the composer of that piece called The Force of Destiny?
La Forza del Destino. Who's that? It's the opera La Forza del Destino.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. It doesn't matter who the composer is. But it's a very profound piece. It's hard.
Overture.
It's hard to hear.
Yeah.
And we're not going to, baby, your song is The Force of Destiny. There's a place for,
we have to build a backdrop to be able to handle that.
Appreciation of some music that's more, I'm going to say complex because Mozart's Clarinet Quintet and Bach are deeply complex.
Sure.
But I mean, there's a place for this. Isn't we can only listen to happy music. There's no place for trouble. No, there's absolutely is a place for trouble. We could talk about Mozart's Dies Irae. I mean, there's a place for the suffering of life, but then suffering in the context of meaning, suffering in the context of this is endurable, suffering in the context of hope. This is conveyed by good music. Bad music can be saying, great suffering, and so you might as well give up, right? And so again, it's not any great piece would be the one I think we want to be having babies listen to from the beginning. But again, in this, we can choose them for ourselves. Just if there's not going to be babies in our home, just kind of more broadly, this third one said choose a great piece of music that you assign to particular people. We can say more broadly, have great pieces like this playing at various times in our home. Is it when we're doing the dishes? Is it when we're cleaning? Is it when we're doing homework? Is it when we're doing handwork? There's we always have to be aware. There's times that are appropriate. There's times that are not appropriate. But a kind of as background. And the idea here, we're going to talk later. Our fifth suggestion is going to be sit down sometimes and do a kind of music appreciation. Right now, we're not saying stop everything and do music appreciation. We pop on the clarinet quintet while we're just going about our business, and the baby's there in the bassinet. More children are going about their business playing.
Yeah, that's great. That's super.
Can we mention sacred music right now?
Yeah,
because I think that too has a very important place on occasionally. Let's listen to some sacred music. This is a tricky one, and I'm not going to be able to talk about this as much as we'd like to. But I think we should say the most important place for sacred music, as the name implies, is in the context of a prayer that's sacred, set apart. I mean, in a liturgical context, this is what, properly speaking, sacred music is most for. And this is, I dare say, the most important music in life, because it goes with the most important acts in life, namely the acts of worship. And I think it's worth, and you tell me, dear, if you have another angle on this, all music could in a sense be measured by, does it in some sense fit with sacred music? I think the music we want to avoid, there's a way that if we're honest in it, we really come to see, we'll see that it just doesn't really fit. It's saying something fun, not just different, but at odds with what sacred music is saying. So I think the better music, good music, including good folk music, isn't at odds with sacred music. It's distinct from sacred music. It's not contradicting sacred music. I think most rock music just contradicts. It has a different worldview. Good folk music doesn't have a different worldview than sacred music. It's for a different part of your world that is founded on the sacred music. So what are we saying about listening to it? Most of all, seek out good liturgy, liturgical contexts where you can appreciate sacred music in its native home. And then at times, maybe prayerful times, meditative times, that could be overdone. I don't think you just put on a Gregorian chant while children are playing. Well, okay, it depends on what they're playing. Go ahead. What do you think?
First of all, I think what you're trying to say is don't feel that because the liturgical act is the highest act, therefore it means if we're going to do the best thing in our household, all we're going to listen to is liturgical music. I think that's what you're trying to say.
For sure.
The thing that I love about listening to sacred music in the home is that it does bring to mind or remind us of a habit of mind that we're supposed to have all the time in our home, which is one of prayer. It's Saint John the Evangelist who says, "Loosen the bowstrings."
That's the story.
The story is told that he says sometimes you need to loosen the bowstring, and he's petting a cat because it's loosening the bowstring of this evangelist who contemplated the highest realities. Even he recognized sometimes you need to descend to the very. So again, other kinds of music captures all those different aspects of life. And sometimes we need to loosen the bowstring. So this is not to say that you should be listening to liturgical music all the time. It has a lot of fitting moments within the home to set a tone of directing our gaze to the Lord, even while we're doing practical things.
I love it. All right, let's give some, before we go on to number 4, then we said we were going to give a list. I'm just going to read it out and we'll put this in the show notes also. But here are 6 or 7 or 8 of ones that you might want to assign to a baby or a person or yourself.
Or get to know in your own home.
Mozart's Clarinet Quintet. or Mozart's Divertimento in D major. That's the first in a group of short works called the Salzburg Symphonies. Haydn's Cello Concerto. We use that for Another Child.
I particularly love Jacqueline Dupre's performance of that.
Artist. Haydn's String Quartets, that's called The Lark.
Beautiful, yeah.
Dvorak's American Quartet.
Just love it.
Bach's Italian Concerto for Piano.
The second movement is incredible in the Italian Concerto.
Choose a few of Bach's solo cello suites.
And Pablo Casal's, for sure. That's who you want to be listening to performing it.
Or also Bach's sonatas for solo violin.
Yeah, my personal preference is Arthur Grumio, but I also love Hilary Hahn.
That's just a handful there of ones that from our experience kind of have that characteristic of the universal appeal, even if it takes some, again, cultivation. Beautiful, profound, rich. So now, sacred music, we just jotted down a couple things that we have particularly appreciated. Gregorian chant, of course, is the pinnacle of sacred music. We go to some monasteries that we have some personal connection with. Clear Creek Monastery, monastery in France, which is the mother house of Clear Creek. Salem Monastery, which is actually the mother house of that one. These are all Benedictine foundations that really focus on beautiful Gregorian chants. You can get like an Easter album that's such a beautiful way to kind of enter into
liturgical seasons,
particularly in the Easter season, Christmas, Advent. There's the Sisters of Our Lady of Ephesus, our friends we know, and they're in Missouri. They have female, Gregorian chants, very powerful.
And also other liturgical music as well. Yeah.
The Sacred Polyphony is we have such an amazing tradition of that. We have, Sofia's heritage is Eastern. I mean, there's many Eastern beautiful. It's different. It might not be for you. There's a particular hymn that we love called the Akathists to the Theotokos,
Blessed
which
Mother.
is repetitive and a beautiful prayer set to a simple tone. There's a Russian Orthodox monastery called the Monks of Valam Monastery that has very beautiful Eastern chant. So just some things that we've appreciated. Our fourth suggestion: choose some fun or festive music for celebrations, parties, Sunday brunch, etc.
Can I just back up for a minute? Because in the previous section we talked about good music, great music. You used the word great music. And then we referred to a lot of classical music composers. So obviously someone might be asking the question, classical music versus folk music. So obviously we've talked about pop music. We're going to try to remove that or not do that. But we have this other genre called folk music. I just want to make a quick distinction maybe of comparing what do we mean by, great music, classical music. How does that differ from folk music? So we're going to make a really big plug for folk music, especially for transitioning from pop music to classical music. It's a very good in between. We'll talk a little bit more in a minute about what it is specifically that folk music provides. But I just wanted to make the distinction that there's a complexity to classical music that better captures a spectrum that we're looking for as regards creating moral states in our emotions and our imagination. So folk music, you can have good folk music and it's going to encourage certain really great attitudes, but they're going to be limited in their scope. Partially because they're usually for a single voice with a few accompanying instruments. And also very often it's a limited melody of short duration. That's what makes it so possible for many to imitate it and repeat it because it's not complicated. It's short. Whereas classical music has a lot of those principles, but then it often elaborates on it. It'll take a short melody and then do inversions and development and things like that allow classical music to capture a greater scope. And then also classical music is usually performed for many instruments, which again, the different voices and timbres of the different instruments capture different aspects of the moral imagination. That this is why we refer to classical music as really great music in your home. It's going to be working on so many different levels in the formation of your person. So obviously there's going to be an intellectual level you're being formed, but there's very much an aesthetic level that's being formed in many, many different layers. And so it has more capacity or power to be developing deeper, broader, more nuanced interrelationship of moral virtues and also of different contexts, different human experiences. And so I just wanted to underscore, this is why we're putting in such a big plug for classical music, because it actually has a broader capacity to do exactly what we're hoping music is going to do in our home.
Right.
And I just want to say also here, as we, I think this is a great moment to be talking about this, because we're talking about festive music, brunch music. Obviously, some of that's going to be classical, but this is where there's kind of a very kind of obvious transition into some more folk music that, creates a kind of a festive mood that's very accessible to many and in lots of different circumstances. So anyway, I lost my train of thought there, but anyway, I think this is a good transition.
Let me just say, folk music, look at the great European cultures. They basically all have some version of a polka beat folk music that they would in general dance to.
Yeah, we have to dance.
They would use at celebrations. It's
part of what it means to be human.
And this is the barnyard dance, the village dance. This is not the height of human experience. This is not the height of contemplation. This is not where we're connecting with the absolute deepest of noble things, but at the same time, we're always going to be dignified. And I think just quickie on polka beat is very different from feel it immediately when you feel you want to start to move, you want to start to dance, you want to stand, but it's not, you don't immediately even find yourself moving in a sensuous way. You don't, when you hear the polka beat, you don't immediately like, I want to get down. I think there's a lot in the word get down, the kind of, just get down. It's immediately kind of, you want to move like, your lower parts, wiggle kind of thing, which is, the polka is very different from that. And
do the polka beat again. So just from a musical perspective, it is making you move a particular kind of way, but it's a very ordered kind of movement. Whereas the rock beat is making you move in a particular kind of way, which is less ordered. It doesn't determine that all of us move the same kind of way. There's an order to that. Now people say, oh, I like being individual. But actually, when there's a template that we can all participate in, it allows us to be together in the same thing. Versus in a rock beat that is just basically it makes you move, but not in any kind, it doesn't determine the order in any way. It actually makes it a radically isolating type of experience because it's nothing that we can all recognize together and choose to join in and do together, right?
I think that's a nice point. And I'm going to just pull out the word sensuous again. The polka beat is, look, you can have a sensuous person who will move sensuously to most anything.
No matter what, yeah,
right?
Exactly.
But if we just look at the objective kind of inclination that comes from the better folk music, there's a reason that particularly when this new beat, that of course is as old as man, became more prominent, in the radical kind of 50s, 60s, the older people were like, no, this we don't
they
dance.
Immediately felt
we
it.
don't.
Sure.
You absolutely feel the difference. There's a very big difference in the room. This has become so universal now. There's so few places and communities where you can find dances, even among people that are looking for something different. There's so few that have the confidence to say, we're not going to go to this music that is the fruit of a culture that was throwing off hierarchy, objective truth, restraint,
communal
temperance,
experience,
chastity. There's a reason that's what was that thing in New York, the city that? Yes, thank you. There's a reason that Woodstock is connected at one time connected with rock music and sexual revolution. These things go together, and so there's folk music that very much is not sacred. It's very fun and very alive, but it doesn't have the sensuous appeal. And this is why, we're not going to get sidetracked on this, but Sofia and you and I have spent a lot of time trying to show young people a different kind of dancing. And we know from the feel at dances, as soon as you put on a song with a certain kind of beat, which is broadly right now, I'm just going to call the rock beat. It's very hard to go back to the other,
for sure,
because now people are riled up in a way that if you then you put on a more staid, a more noble, but still very fun and alive song, it's like, no, that's that's for Granny and Grandpa. Where's the fun stuff? And it's mesmerizing. And it's very hard to fight that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Speaking of that, when we do contra dances, there's also a palpable experience of people having so much fun together. As soon as you put something on that has more of that dissipated beat, you immediately feel the change in the room of the party, the gathering loses that feeling of centripetal energy that we're all doing something together. There's a dissipation that happens. There might be a heightened vibe, but it's dissipated. It's like milk that was in a carton, good milk in a carton, which is now spilled across the floor, which makes it completely useless, you know?
People listening or thinking with us here might say, oh, come on, can't we just let the young people have their fun? You know,
but we've experienced it.
We do want the young people to have their fun.
And they do have fun with ordered music.
And we want them to have fun when they wake up the next morning.
They feel good about it.
They have a sense of they did something that was in accord with their dignity.
It doesn't take away the fun.
Loose in a way that there's a cutting loose where you're subverting your dignity. You're subverting one of the cardinal virtues of the temperance and the restraint that always sets you free. Mm-hmm. This is always the lies, the lie of the devil. That the greater freedom is when you cut loose. And this is one of the main negative messages that this music is constantly screaming, times literally, into our ears of cut loose, go ahead. It feels good. It's okay. And it actually subverts happiness. That's the point. We're not being prudish here. We're seeing a truth about what will make people happier. Mm-hmm. That's why this is so important, right? So choosing the fun or festive music, we just wrote down some things. Sunday brunch tends to be, we try to make it a fun and festive time. And we think when we have guests over and what kind of people are milling around, what kind of music are we playing? Again, we're not trying to point fingers and accuse, but so often people the go-to music is they're playing the music of Woodstock, they're playing the music of the sexual revolution. When we have just a party or festive gathering of friends in our house, and we're not going to go into it. We should have a discussion sometime just on wedding receptions. Mm-hmm. And and what's fitting to celebrate the dignity of marriage and how we dance when we're actually celebrating.
Yes, that's a separate topic. We can't go there.
Festive classical music. Made a list here of ones that for us we call it Sunday brunch music. Handel's Water Music, Handel's Messiah, Vivaldi's Four Seasons, very just alive. It just kind of makes you feel good as you listen to it. Another one that's not so much that way, but Vivaldi's Concerto for Lute in D major. Respighi's Ancient Airs and Dances.
I just love that one.
A real, it's so dignified, but it's just so
joyful and full of energy. Love that one. Love it.
Haydn's Trumpet Concerto, Hummel's Trumpet Concerto.
Yeah, so joyful.
It's just,
and there's nothing like a trumpet for making you feel like you're celebrating.
It's like, welcome to my home. We're going to sit down. We're going to have some brunch here. Let's have a, wonderful time. Let's rejoice with one another. Again, you got, hospitality. You got to think about what fits. So, there's where there's kind of the higher festive classical music, or we go to good, maybe instrumental, doesn't have to be instrumental, folk music. And I'm going to just reel off of them. Again, we'll put them in the show notes. You're going to go Irish. You can't beat the Chieftains. We especially love the album called Chieftains 5, as in just number 5. Another one we call our brunch music is the Chieftains one called the Celtic Harp. There's a Northern Ireland group called Altan, Altam. And then there's more the singing songs, the Clancy Brothers or Makem and Clancy. We can go Scottish, the Tannahill Weavers, the Quarries. Then there's kind of the Canada version, Cape Breton of Scottish, Natalie McMaster, Alistair Fraser, and Natalie Haas have an album we love called Fire and Grace.
Which is cello and violin, right? Yeah. Really, you would not think that has dance rhythm in it. It's amazing how they use their instruments to make the percussive dance music rhythm. It's really great.
In a non-sensuous, but just very alive
so
way.
Joyful.
There's so much there's good American music. The more original kind of country music was a kind of genuine American folk music that shows up still in a lot of bluegrass. We happen to like bluegrass. Some people that doesn't appeal to them. Doesn't appeal to you, that's fine. But with a few groups, we like Blue Highway, Nashville Bluegrass Band, Doc Watson, Jim and Jesse. So there's Ukrainian folk music that's just so delightful and alive. A lot of people might have their kind of ethnic things, just Sicilian music. There's so much there that is kind of these cultural treasures have been passed on that have been basically just dumped in view of pop music. It's just been, people neither make this music anymore, they don't sing the music, they don't listen to the music. By and large, people aren't, other than a kind of renewal here or there, or people being intentional about it. We're not dancing. It makes such a difference. We'll have a whole nother discussion sometime about dancing. We just were inspired to write down some things about some Christmas albums.
Joyful time, you need joyful music.
We're just going to toss a couple out here. The Chieftains have a great one called The Bells of Dublin. The Cambridge Singers have a lot of great
all their albums are amazing.
Christmas Star, that's one of our favorites. Another great kind of winter/Christmas album, When I See Winter Return.
This one is actually hard to find, and it is outstanding. I really love it.
Pint and Felicia Dale are the ones that do.
Yeah, if you can find that one is really marvelous.
I think you can at least. Christmas Around the World is one that's kind of a French one. We like Chip Davis's Renaissance Holiday, which has some really cool Renaissance. We also listen to some movie soundtracks. We love Emma. Master and Commander has some fun things in it. Les Choristes, that French one that you might have heard of. Even some children's ones like Fantastic Mr. Fox, Charlotte's Web. So, I mean, there's a place for diversity and looking around and just kind of finding those ones that don't take a dive into ugly sensuous music and have some fun stuff.
Yeah, I think it's good to have a good list of folk music that especially helps in transition from bad music that you don't want in your house to the really great music. Having this kind of middle ground of good folk music is going to be quite important. We love balladeers like Dave Mallet or Kate Resby. And, this is not necessarily endorsing every single song that they have written, but those are good places to go.
Because one always has to have discernment.
Yeah, exactly. And there'll be ones that are good folk songs, but you don't particularly like, which is fine too. And so I just wanted to also mention, as regards trying to approach the good music, to always remember that although classical music is very complex and so deep and so beautiful, it can be accessed on many, many different levels, and to not be intimidated by the wealth that it offers us. First and foremost, it's music. And music really acts on our imagination and our emotions. And so a lot of this great music, the best way to approach it, especially initially, is let it move you. We talk about this. For me, it draws pictures in my mind, and maybe if you're introducing young children to it, you can say, that just makes me think of a pine forest in the snow. Doesn't that part just sound like a wintry landscape? Don't be embarrassed to say, my goodness, that totally makes me think of blah. And you might actually be very surprised to discover that someone you're listening to in the same room says, yeah, that's what it made me think of too. Like, how's that possible that we both had the same imagination of things? So anyway, I just want to encourage, as approaching classical music for the first time, to be aware that it extends a friendly hand to all levels of listeners. I'm going to also just throw in, speaking of classical music paints a picture, Saint-Saëns' Carnival of Animals is a really wonderful way to introduce young children to a way of listening to classical music, because every single one of those tracks or parts of the composition are dedicated to a certain kind of animal. And so if you know that the elephant part is an elephant, it's like, oh my gosh, that's so obvious. It sounds just like an elephant. Or the tortoise being so slow. If you explain that to the children, it just makes them so excited, because they can see it too. And so it kind of presents a paradigm in which we can start listening to a lot of beautiful classical music. And then as we listen more, as my sister said, deeper and deeper things become present, but there should be no anxiety about accessing those deepest parts right away at the beginning. They enrich us from the very beginning, and it can be at a very simple level that is kind of classical music's friendly way of extending the hand to the newest so that everyone is enriched.
That's great. And that's a nice transition and makes a bit of the point, which we'll do quickly, of our final point, of do some what we call music appreciation. And this is different from the others, because this is more of a, hey, on a Sunday afternoon, let's sit down together in our household. Is it just spouses? Is it just someone alone? Is it you with the children? And we're going to listen to a piece of music, and we're not going to do anything else. Now, maybe someone can be drawing at the same time, or, working on their handwriting, copying out scripture, but the idea here, not just music in the background, but we're going to take a piece, like for instance, any of those pieces that we recommended to us under number 3 to assigned individuals, where we were talking about like Mozart's clarinet quintet, all of those pieces and many, 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 many countless more are worth just let's, in an age appropriate and a time appropriate, don't want to do something too long. It could just be something that's just an 8-minute piece. It could be Die Moldau by Smetana.
Yeah.
It's like 11 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just very beautiful.
Very evocative.
Let's just listen to this. Children, it very much can do that. I mean, maybe just start by Pachelbel's Canon. Let's just sit down and let's just not have that in the background. Let's really listen. And as Sophia just said, be moved by it. And it doesn't, you don't have to go around the room. What were you picturing? They don't have to picture anything necessarily, right? It's just, but this piece, and again, we can move into this slowly. This is moving at a little higher level, but I mean, start with baby steps. But it gives that sense of, sometimes Aristotle says that great music enhances contemplation and can move us towards contemplation. I think part of what he's saying there, and truly, he's not talking about folk music. I don't think so. He's talking about the music that really more is capturing the more profound human moral states and sentiments. And as we talked about in our other discussion, this is one of the beautiful things. It expands the soul. And you've been saying this, Sophia, it's a way of actually exposing our souls to noble inclinations, noble sentiments that perhaps we haven't so much yet tasted ourselves, but we feel there's something incredibly powerful going on in this music, and we start to notice it. We in some sense, contemplation is a kind of looking, and here's a kind of a looking through a hearing. And it doesn't have to be hyper intellectual. It's just feel your soul being moved by something deep. This is a kind of practice for contemplation, and to convey to people in our home. Sometimes we're just going to sit down and listen to a great piece. To appreciate it is a concrete thing that's worth doing.
Yeah, it makes me think of one of the things that you've encouraged families to do a lot is to read out loud together. And you read a good story out loud, and it's not about, prodding people. What did you think? What do you think the story is saying? But it's a lovely opportunity to provide a place for people to share their experience. So by music appreciation, we don't mean dissecting it technically or knowing something about the music that's academic. It's really as simple as, here's this thing that we shared together. And it's a great opportunity to start a conversation by saying, what did that make you think of? Or what did you feel when you thought of it? Does anybody want to share what they thought? And sometimes someone could just say, it just made me feel warm. That's a great comment, right? Because basically what you've elicited in that circumstance is a person, we both all listen to something together, and that person has a safe place to express what they experienced. And so it becomes actually kind of if you do this regularly, kind of habitual context within the family, that what I've experienced as an individual has a place to be heard. And then it really becomes a delightful place of sharing. That often happens when we read things out loud. So you can certainly do the same thing with music. I think a lot of people are intimidated with music, but it's really no different from reading a great book out loud, because you don't have any expectations when you say to the person, what do you guys think? What do you think that music was saying? Or how did it make you feel? This is not looking for a right answer. It's simply providing a context for us to share a rich experience together.
Amen. Or perhaps in this way, if we have husband and wife there, which is ideal for doing something as a family, each of us could just afterwards, first of all, sitting in silence together is fine.
Great too.
But then maybe just say, I really appreciated this about that, or it really spoke to me in this way. Spouse answers, maybe a couple back and forth. And I like the idea of maybe saying, hey, if anyone else has anything you want to share, we'd love to hear it. But that might be a lower key, safer way than, now you all tell us what you experienced, right? That might be a little scary for them. And it all depends on what the habit is. So I'm not disagreeing there. I'm just saying it can be even a way of being just a little bit more hands off if we start by sharing some things and indicate love to hear anything that you all want to share, but it's not as though you don't have to say anything.
And there's no right answer. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, those are our 5. We just jotted down a few more that we thought might be fun for that music appreciation. Again, anything that we listed earlier under number 3. And again, this is just some examples. There's countless other ones. Sophia mentioned Saint-Saëns' Carnival of Animals. We love Saint-Saëns' Organ Symphony.
Yeah,
the
it's
final
very dramatic.
movement of that is amazing.
Yeah.
Again, Bach solo suites for cello and violin, any Mozart violin concerto, Mozart's Requiem, more modern Duraflay's Requiem,
These are
Bach's
choral works.
Passion of St. John or Passion of St. Matthew.
Yeah, those are choral works, and we've actually had a lot of fun printing out the text to follow along while we're listening.
Especially during Lent.
Yeah, beautiful.
Brahms' Hungarian dances.
Yeah, very evocative.
So in any case, we hope that these concrete things have given you some ideas. We're going to keep discussing these things ourselves. Always love your feedback and look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks for tuning in this episode of The Intentional Household. If you've enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and leave a rating or review. If you have any topic requests, please send them to lifecraftgroup@gmail.com. For our Wednesday reflections, free courses, reading groups, and live events, please visit life-craft.org.